Most deserts are graveyards for civilizations. But the Iranian plateau followed a different script. Out there, the problem announces itself almost immediately. The heat presses down, rain is scarce, and water disappears fast. In a place like that, long-term urban life should have been fragile. Cities should have flared up briefly and then vanished, swallowed by drought, distance, and time. And yet, they did not vanish. That is the first thing that makes this story worth telling. Because when people ask why ancient Persia endured, they usually reach first for the obvious answers. Gold, armies, kings, empire. But those are surface answers. The deeper answer lies lower down, in the land itself. A huge part of survival here depended on one simple physical fact. Water moves downhill. That sounds almost too obvious to matter. But in a dry world, it mattered enough to shape civilization. While the sun baked the surface, people moved water underground, where it was protected from heat and lost less to evaporation. They did not defeat the landscape. They learned how to work with it. And once that becomes clear, even the word paradise starts to change. Today, that word usually points upward, heaven, clouds, the afterlife. But the English word paradise has much older roots in the ancient Iranian world. Forms in Avestan and Old Persian referred to a walled or enclosed garden, a protected green space made possible in a harsh landscape. Think of it as a line drawn in the dust. Desert on one side, cultivated life on the other. So in the eyes of the ancients, paradise was never simply given. It had to be made. At first glance, a wall looks easy to explain. It keeps danger out. That is true. But in a landscape like this, a wall had another job as well. It held a small world together. In later Persian thought, especially in Zoroastrian tradition, the world was often understood through the tension between Asha, truth and order, and Druj, disorder and the lie. You do not need to force that into a strict architectural formula to feel its logic. A walled garden can almost read like a physical echo of it. Order within, uncertainty beyond. Inside the wall, shade could survive. Wind could be slowed. A fragile microclimate could be protected. But walls alone were never enough, because a garden still needed water. And in a place like this, surface water could disappear quickly. So the answer had to go underground. This is the Qanat. From above, a Qanat might look almost insignificant, just a line of holes across the desert running toward the foothills. But below that line was the real system, hand-dug underground channels carrying groundwater toward the thirsty plains. Most were not enormous, though some exceptional systems stretched for dozens of kilometres. And that is the part that still feels astonishing. They moved water without a single pump, without electricity, without fuel. The slope did the work. The land did the work. That is what makes Qanat so powerful as an idea. They did not try to overpower the landscape. They arranged life around rules the landscape had already set. And as long as those channels were maintained, the system could keep going long, after the rulers who commissioned it were gone. Qanats helped smaller settlements survive. But when an empire decided to build something on the scale of Persepolis, the problem changed. This was no longer only about bringing water in. It was also about keeping water from tearing everything apart. Founded by Darius the Great in 518 BCE, Persepolis became the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire. Most people know it for what rises above the terrace, the columns, the reliefs, the grandeur. That is what catches the light. But part of Persepolis survived because of what happened in the dark. Beneath the palaces lay a network of drainage channels and water management features. More than 2,500 years ago, engineers were already planning gradients to control runoff from the mountain above the terrace. That matters, because beauty on the surface is fragile. A palace can be magnificent and still be damaged by water. A terrace can look eternal and still be weakened. Little by little, by runoff, erosion, and gravity working against it over time. The builders of Persepolis understood that. So they did not only build upward, they also built downward. They built for runoff, for drainage, for the fact that the mountain would always be there. And that is why Persepolis is more than a monument. It is also a buried engineering system. Without that hidden system, the splendour above it becomes much harder to imagine lasting at all. Today, the timber roofs and upper structures are gone, but those buried drainage features still remain beneath the site, quiet evidence of the engineering that helped the complex endure. Engineering can move water, it can slow runoff, protect a terrace, and keep a garden alive. But there is another kind of danger it cannot remove, the kind that lives in the mind. That is where Jiroft enters the story. In southeastern Iran, in the region archaeologists call Jiroft, chlorite vessels and objects were carved with motifs including scorpions and snakes. Their meaning is still uncertain, and scholars are right to remain cautious. But even so, the imagery suggests a world deeply aware of danger, suffering, and death. But if the scorpions point toward threat, then Kurangun points toward something else. Not danger, power. The sacred power of water. High above the Farlian River in southwest Iran, the Elamites carved an open-air sanctuary into the cliff. There, divine figures appear with flowing water, and below them runs a carved stream with fish. That image has a strange force to it, because on a dry cliff, fish do not belong there by accident, and water does not belong there by accident either. So why carve flowing water into rock already scorched by the sun? Because here, water was never only practical, it fed the land, shaped belief, and tied people to the landscape beneath them. Even now, some parts of Kurangun remain debated, including exactly who those divine figures were. But the larger point is hard to miss. In a dry world, flowing water meant more than survival. It meant sacred presence. But sacred meaning alone could not make water safe to drink. If water carried power, it also had to be stored, settled, and made usable. That is where the story turns again. At Chogha Zanbil, the sacred Elamite city founded around 1250 BCE and now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, river water did not arrive ready to use. It came heavy with silt, so the people here had to slow it down, catch it, hold it still, let the sediment settle, and only then guide cleaner water into the sacred complex. Even in a holy city, survival still depended on hydraulic skill. And then there is Shushtar. If Chogha Zanbil shows controlled water, Shushtar shows water on a much larger scale. Now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Shushtar turned the Karun, the largest river in Iran, into a working system of canals, tunnels, mills, and irrigation works. This was not a single channel. It was a whole hydraulic landscape. And in its present form, parts of that system have remained in use for about 18 centuries. That is not just engineering. That is continuity. If you respect the slope, the river keeps working for you. By the time this story reaches its end, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. At first, these things seem separate: a walled garden, underground water channels, hidden drainage beneath an imperial terrace, and rivers turned into hydraulic systems. Different places, different centuries, different political worlds, and yet they keep pointing back to the same thing. Ancient Iran did not endure because it was somehow immune to drought, heat, or time. It endured because people learned how to build with the logic of the land. That is what ties this whole story together, not separate curiosities, but the same argument repeated in different forms. Rulers changed, dynasties rose and fell, palaces burned, names disappeared, but the slope of the land remained. Water still moved downward, Gravity still did its work. And that may be the deepest continuity of all. Not stone, not empire, not spectacle, the logic beneath them. That is what endured, not only monuments, a way of thinking.